From the outside, Russia projects the image of a powerful superstate, vast, resource-rich, and militarily dominant. But behind this image lies a story of strategic missteps, overconfidence, and systemic collapse. In this 19-minute breakdown, we uncover every major Russian failure, military, political, economic, and technological, that has shaped the nation's decline in the 21st century. Let's begin with the illusion of military supremacy. For decades, Russia sold the idea that its army was the second most powerful in the world, a modernized force capable of taking on NATO or any regional threat. But the invasion of Ukraine shattered that illusion. What was expected to be a lightning-fast operation, capturing Kyiv in 72 hours, turned into a brutal, drawn-out war that exposed the cracks in Russia's military machinery. Poor logistics, outdated equipment, and low troop morale crippled their advances. Russian tanks, once seen as symbols of strength, became burning wrecks scattered across Ukrainian fields. The world saw a superpower humiliated not by a larger enemy, but by its own corruption and incompetence. Failure number 2, the intelligence catastrophe. The Kremlin's intelligence agencies, the FSB and GRU, failed to assess the true spirit of Ukrainian resistance. They believed the Ukrainian government would collapse and the people would welcome Russian troops with open arms. Instead, Ukraine united like never before, and Russia found itself fighting an entire nation that refused to surrender. This colossal intelligence blunder destroyed Russia's credibility and forced Putin into a war he couldn't win quickly, or at all. Next, the economic miscalculation. Russia underestimated the global response to its invasion. Western nations, long accused of being divided and slow, suddenly moved with unprecedented unity. Sanctions hit Russia's banks, industries, and billionaires like a thunderbolt. The ruble plummeted, foreign investments evaporated, and global tech companies abandoned the Russian market. For a moment, the Kremlin celebrated that its economy hadn't fully collapsed, but the reality was far more grim. What followed was long-term isolation, inflation, and a slow economic suffocation. Russia's economy now survives on war production and oil sales to a handful of countries, a far cry from the diversified superpower Putin once dreamed of. Failure number 4, the diplomatic disaster. Russia's war didn't just alienate the West, it destroyed decades of influence built across Europe and Asia. Nations that once relied on Russian gas and trade turned away. Even traditional partners like India and China have grown cautious, using Russia for cheap resources but avoiding full alliance. The Kremlin's aggression transformed it from a feared global player into a desperate partner with shrinking leverage. The idea of a multipolar world that Moscow often preached has backfired, because Russia is no longer seen as one of the poles. Now, let's talk about technological failure. Modern warfare demands advanced precision, drones, satellites, artificial intelligence, and cyber capabilities. Russia, once proud of its scientific heritage, found itself stuck in the past. Many of its weapons still rely on Soviet-era designs, while its high-tech components were imported from the West, the very countries now sanctioning it. Without these imports, production stalled. Missiles malfunctioned, drones were improvised with civilian parts, and cyberattacks that once terrified the world turned sloppy and predictable. The myth of Russian cyber superiority was broken. Internal decay has been another silent but deadly failure. Russia's corruption runs so deep that it eats away at every level of the system. Soldiers are sent to the front lines without proper gear because their superiors stole the funds. Construction projects collapse before completion because corners were cut. Money meant for modernization vanishes into offshore accounts. Even military conscripts complain of being sent into battle with broken rifles and expired rations. This is not just inefficiency, it's a national disease that no amount of propaganda can cure. Failure number 7, the information war. While Russia has mastered domestic propaganda, it utterly failed to control the global narrative. State media like RT and Sputnik were banned or discredited worldwide. The Kremlin's attempts to justify its actions, calling it a special operation, or claiming to denazify Ukraine, fell flat in the face of brutal images of bombed cities and civilian deaths. Social media turned against Moscow, and the global public saw Russia not as a victim of Western plots, but as an aggressor. For a nation that prided itself on information warfare, this was an embarrassing defeat. The human failure is perhaps the most tragic of all. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have died or been maimed. Families back home are silenced or lied to. The draft forced young men to fight a war many didn't believe in. Mothers bury sons whose names aren't even listed officially. This loss of human capital, the brain drain of educated Russians fleeing the country, has crippled Russia's future. The smartest minds now build their lives in exile, leaving behind a generation broken by fear and propaganda. Failure number 9. The moral collapse. For many years, Russia portrayed itself as the defender of tradition, faith, and global balance. But its invasion of a peaceful neighbor, attacks on civilians, and nuclear threats destroyed that image. The moral high ground was lost forever. Even nations that once admired Russian resilience began to see it as a rogue state, run by paranoia and aggression. Finally, the ultimate failure, the failure of leadership. Vladimir Putin's entire legacy is built on control, fear, and illusion. But in his pursuit of dominance, he isolated himself from reality. Surrounded by yes men and outdated Soviet nostalgia, he made decisions based on ego, not strategy. His refusal to admit mistakes has dragged his country into a war of attrition it cannot win. Instead of reviving Russian greatness, Putin's leadership has accelerated its decline. What was once an empire now faces stagnation, isolation, and slow decay. And yet, this is not just about Putin. It's about the system he built. A system where truth is dangerous, innovation is punished, and loyalty matters more than competence. The world is witnessing the consequences of that system: the collapse of trust, the destruction of national identity, and the erosion of hope. So, when we talk about Russia's failures, we're not just counting battle losses or sanctions. We're looking at a chain reaction: political lies leading to military blunders, economic greed feeding corruption, and moral blindness leading to global isolation. Today, Russia still has nuclear weapons, oil reserves, and a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. But these are relics of a past that's slipping away. True power comes from progress, stability, and global respect, and those, Russia has lost. As the world moves forward, with new alliances, technologies, and visions for the future, Russia remains trapped in a Cold War shadow of its own making. Unless it breaks free from this cycle of deception and fear, every future endeavor will repeat the same pattern of failure. This is the story of modern Russia, a story not of external enemies, but of internal collapse. Every failure, explained, and every warning, ignored. Because in the end, the greatest threat to Russia has never been NATO, Ukraine, or the West. It has always been itself.